My guest today is Lisa Schermerhorn, who has over 20 years of experience as a transformational leader. She is an expert in human behavior, leadership, and personal development. She is also an award-winning speaker and has spoken and emceed at Harvard and Columbia universities. As co-founder of the Center for Next Level Performance, she is trained as a why coach, helping people discover their why and purpose. In today's episode, we talk about her best-selling book, "And Every Belief is a Lie." This book gives you the tools to identify the lies you've believed that hold you back, and it gives you the tools to overcome any obstacle you may face. Welcome to Lifeology.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I am excited about this. My viewers and listeners obviously don't know this, but I got to meet you a few months ago at Blue Talks. So our good friend Corey Poirier, who's been on my show several times, he has a wonderful program for individuals who want to be able to speak. He teaches them multiple things and to help people get on TED Talks, but also to be able to talk about certain topics that TED Talks may not approve of, but also are just as beneficial as well. So if anyone's interested in that, go to bluetalks.com. That's BLU talks.com and tell them that you heard about Corey Poirier, Blue Talks, from my show with James Miller, Lifeology. Lisa, it's such a pleasure to talk with you. I didn't get a chance to hear you speak, but I've heard wonderful things about it. How did you get into this transformational space?
Well, sometimes we get pulled in kicking and screaming. So mine was about 20 years ago. Well, going back to when I talk about it, and every belief is a lie. As a young child, I had undiagnosed learning disabilities. So I was in kindergarten, and everyone could read, could write, could do their math, and I was lost. And so I grew up thinking that I was stupid. I spent every summer in summer school, gave my power away to everyone and anything that I thought had more power than I did, that knew more than I did, which was pretty much everyone. And by the time I was about 38, I had a nervous breakdown. I didn't understand my purpose. I didn't understand why I was here. I became suicidal. I just didn't want to be here anymore. I was going to conventional therapy 2 to 3 times a week, and nothing was helping me. And someone suggested a hypnotist, and I was like, "Don't they make you quack like a duck?"
I know, exactly. Quite funny.
And I was desperate, so I tried it, and I realized that how quickly they were able to help me get to the root cause of my issues so fast, and started clearing things out. And I said to myself, I want to do this and help others. And I went on to train to become a hypnotherapist, master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, and a lot of metaphysical techniques that took me around the world that I kind of a la carte. I took little bits of everything and kind of made it my own, very eclectic. But I sought to become the person I was seeking 20 years ago, so that I didn't have to go on that someone doesn't have to go on that same journey of going from person to person. And it's been an extraordinary journey, and I'm very grateful for it now. But I don't want to do it again.
At the time, we don't see it. Yeah, I know, right? Well, it's funny. I always tell people, like, our life is like a jigsaw puzzle piece. And my viewers and listeners hear me say this all the time. So every event we go through is like a little jigsaw puzzle piece. So you were undiagnosed with a learning disorder until later. You gave your power away. All these things happened, but all those pieces, when we link together, create who you are today. Obviously, you love many aspects of who you are today, so you couldn't be who you are today unless you went through those. So just like every event, it becomes too overwhelming and we isolate that event, it makes no sense. But when you find how it connected to another level or another thread, another puzzle piece, if you will, you can see, retrospectively, now it makes sense. As you said, we don't want to go through it again, but it allowed us to be the person we are today. I have a question I always want to ask. I always like to ask people, what's different about you and what's the same versus the younger version versus today? What's different and the same?
What's the same is my curiosity. And challenge. Like, I like to be different. I like to do everything differently. If someone ever called me normal, I think I'd be insulted.
I know, right? It means it's average. I'm like, I'm average.
I'm always pushing limits. And what's the same is my heart. My great love of others and wanting to be of help to others. there was too much of that, no boundaries when I was younger.
Sure.
So I had to learn to put boundaries around that. But yeah, this intense desire to do something that's different, that works differently.
Yeah.
And that also gets into my why, which you mentioned about being a why coach.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Well, before
Yeah.
we do it, let's talk about your program first. So not your program, your coaching. I'm going to talk about that, and then I want to go into the why, talk about your book as well. Tell me more about your co-founder of this company. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, the Center for Next Level Performance. I have a business partner, Kevin Martin, and we both have similar backgrounds. And one of the things that we found really powerful is that people get stuck on these hamster wheels doing the same thing over and over again. And what they don't realize is that a lot of those belief systems start when we're very young. They
Mm-hmm.
start from these belief systems, the programming that comes in. Dr. Bruce Lipton likes to talk about the fact that we're fully
Yeah.
programmed by the time we're
Yes.
7 years old. I don't know
Yes.
that I believe that, but we get programmed by our socioeconomic status.
Yes.
That alone has a huge impact if there's scarcity or lots of money, however your family decided to deal
Mm-hmm.
with that. You also, that your geographical area, what your
Yeah.
culture is, because some cultures are all about education, some are get to work as soon as possible and help the family. So
Mm-hmm.
we are impacted by so many things. And the other thing we're impacted by is epigenetics. We
Yes.
inherit belief systems
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done studies with mice to show that every time they smelled a particular smell, they would get
Mm-hmm.
shocked. And their
Yes.
grandpups went on to, just from the smell, would run.
Yes.
So we can carry belief systems that aren't ours, as well as the trauma and belief systems and programming from our life. And then how do we access them?
Yeah.
Because we don't have awareness. They're unconscious most of the
Yes.
time. So the
Yes.
work I do helps people access those unconscious belief systems. We bring it up and look at it, say hello to it, thank it, release it, and let it
Mm-hmm.
go. And then
Yes.
what do you wish you could have instead? What can we replace this with? It's like putting a new set of glasses on to see the world from a reframe, from a different perspective. And I like to say it's like time travel for your emotions.
Mm.
Because you can't change what happened, but you can change the
Correct.
way you feel about it. And when
Correct.
you go into a place of gratitude and the gifts that come from something instead of victim mode, it changed your whole perception on the world.
In psychology, we have what's called radical acceptance, which is sums up what you just said. So radical acceptance is you take the facts as they are. Doesn't mean you like it. Doesn't mean it lets anyone off the hook. It just means these are the facts. And I can choose to sit with these facts and live in misery, or I can choose to sit with these facts and do something about it. What are my options? And so it allows for what we call dialectics. Fancy word that says that means two opposing things can exist at the same time. For example, I am at a funeral and I'm really sad because someone passed away. But yet as I'm really sad, I think about a happy moment and I start to laugh and I have joy, but yet I'm still sad. So the dialectic, it's a great way to help people understand that the complexity of the emotions that we have are so great that it's not, I can only feel this or that. So when you sit with that trauma or whatever it is you've experienced, yes, it's still painful and you can still be empowered. Both are true. And it sounds like that's great work that you guys do as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, doing the work, especially the epigenetics work, was so
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Especially what was really interesting in working with Indigenous people,
Mm-hmm.
because Indigenous people, because of their abuse over centuries,
Yes.
and a lot of them wouldn't look me in the eye. And
Oh,
I was
goodness.
working with someone out of Mexico who had Mayan and Aztec DNA in him, and he's had this terrible time with his self esteem. So we went back 10 generations to clear
Oh,
out
wow.
his
Wow.
issues around self esteem. And what's interesting is you don't have to know who those people are.
Of
You
course.
don't
Yeah.
need to know who your great, 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 great grandparent is. But you, on some level, on an unconscious level, know who they are, and you can
Mm-hmm.
have a
Mm-hmm.
healing and go through the generations. It's
Yeah.
pretty extraordinary.
Epigenetics is something that's really important. So we come from a genetic aspect as well. So sometimes an epigenetics can be later on in life, one of those genes, if you will, are quote turned on. And so that's where sometimes people are like, oh, where did this come from? For example, if someone starts to bald, well, where did that come from? Well, the epigenetic aspect of it, it was quote turned on, and therefore you're starting to lose some of your hair. I wanted to transition in your book. Every belief is a lie. And in that, it's quite interesting. So my viewers who are watching this, you can see this right now. I don't know if you probably knew this. I learned this when I was on my show a couple years ago. This person told me that in the word belief, if you look at the antonym, the opposite of that in the English dictionary, the opposite of belief is lie. And so it's interesting because first off, you showed lie is actually in belief. But yeah, from the English language, the antonym of belief is actually lie. So I'm really excited to hear how you help people recognize those thinking errors and how it stops them from becoming the person that they were destined to be.
Right. So we want to look at the lies. Anything that creates negativity, fear, anxiety, those are all negative belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to take a look at them. And then what happens is every time we have a thought, we have these neuropeptides that go throughout our body and then connect to our cells. So there's a lot of somatic work that it's called, where it's connected at a cellular level. So I use a technique called the Sedona method, also known as the emotional release method.
Mm-hmm.
And you identify, if you close your eyes and you think about a particular incident and you feel it in your physical body. And it's a very simple technique of, should I let it go? Yes. Could I let it go? Yes. When now? You repeat it over and over again. You give it a number from 0 to 10, and you can literally feel those numbers go down. The idea is to get to neutral. Because when you're neutral, your emotions aren't driving you anymore. You can see it as an adult, fully grounded, and see what's really happening. And suddenly the way you see it changes.
Yeah.
And it's a very powerful technique. And another thing that I use a lot is forgiveness work. Forgiveness creates miracles. And Dr. Joe Vitale talks a lot about, he wrote a book called Zero Limits. And in his book, he talks about a process called the Ho'oponopono, which is an ancient Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. And I use that with almost all my clients when I did it for myself, because I tried to write this book for 10 years. And I made a list of all of my negative beliefs and I started releasing, but I realized I needed to forgive myself. Yeah. And I had some other people in my life that I needed to forgive. As soon as I did that, the entire book literally poured through me.
Wow.
Is that when you spend 60, 70 to 80% of your thoughts unconsciously on being resentful, angry, insecure, any of those things, how much is left for you?
Yeah.
When I cleared that out, it was like this incredible experience of allowing all of this information to come through me. And then I'd be reading it and go, who wrote this?
That's hysterical. It's amazing, isn't it? In psychology, we also teach, I want to really corroborate what you're saying. So in psychology, we teach that whatever you think about determines what you feel. What you feel determines what you do or how your body responds. So there's our conscious thought. For example, right now I'm talking to you and I'm being mindful of what is going on, but there's other elements in my subconscious that's happening it's influencing me. So if I think I'm 100% concentrated here, well, we know it's not true because there's always underlying aspects of that. So when you're talking about this, so my thoughts create my emotions. My emotions are the representation of how my body is going to experience it, and then my body then either creates these neuropeptides or it creates dopamine, serotonin, or whatever it might be, or it allows me just to have a great conversation, or I have a really bad conversation, whatever it might look like. And so what's really neat to hear that you talk about that is you help people identify that either from the conscious aspect or the subconscious mind. And then from there, how it relates to their emotions. So that's how negative self-esteem and all that can be expressed. And then the not being able to look at someone, that is the expression of low self-esteem based off of what they've experienced. And so it's really important to understand that component just so we understand the framework of it. And then you do all the work that actually helps people. In psychology, we also have they're called cognitive distortions, fancy term that basically means a thinking error. Actually 15 common thinking errors. And just like you're talking about the lens, it's so funny you talk about that, Lisa. I talk about that too. So these thinking errors or these lies are the ways in which it changes how you think. In other words, I put the lens on, all of a sudden my thoughts have this version, this lens, then changes my emotions then change my response. So you teach people how to remove that lens. So therefore they see it as it is, kind of like a diamond, has so many facets. You just turn the diamond just a little bit and you get a different perception of that, which then changes people's mood, which then changes how they show up in the world. So that's a long-winded thing of what I just said, but I really want to corroborate your work. You're just so great with that. But I want to also help people understand it from this framework. So therefore, when they read your stuff, like, yeah, this really makes much more sense. But once again, congratulations on your book. To be able to read something post inspiration sometimes can be very humbling. How was that for you?
From the standpoint of reading my own book?
Yes. Yeah. Well, exactly.
It was interesting because as I went through the process, it was pouring through me. And, the hardest part for me was, when do you know to hit send? When is it done?
Yeah.
It's like a piece of art, and it's like birthing a child. And that was very terrifying for me. And then finally having to release all that and then going through it. And I put a lot of my own personal stories in there. And that was also very, raw and very vulnerable in there. I also made sure, because my ex-husband, we were married for 29 years. I made this even though we had a contentious divorce, I made sure that I wanted him honored in this book, because he was a huge part of my life and a huge part of who I am today. And it was a huge part of a healing process that we are now starting to become friends.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful.
It's really beautiful. So it was very cathartic. I tell people, even if you choose not to even put it out in the world, just writing your story and looking at it, and you'll know when you're ready, when you go from a place of writing it from the sense of a victim to being empowered.
That empowerment. Yes.
The empowerment, because you want to uplift people. If you're down in the muck and the mire, then there's more work to do, because no one wants to read about that. They don't. We have our own stuff. We're in our own stuff. I don't want to read about someone else's.
I know. In the same way. Totally the same way. I mean, it's funny. I will watch some TV shows and I'm like, oh, it's so sad. And then when I realize how sad it is, I'm like, I don't really want to internalize this. So I'm like, it's a great story, but I'm going to put that aside because I have my own stuff I have to deal with. And as we said earlier, though, you think of life, we only have so many quote energy points a day. So if I were to say to you, Lisa, I'm going to give you 100 energy dollars, how do you spend it? And so throughout the day. And so sometimes individuals will be bankrupt at noon because they put so much energy into things that just really don't serve them. So you do great work as far as helping people really focus on what matters, what's truth, and what's that lie, using those energy dollars on that truth to become the person that you want to become.
I love that, energy dollars. Yeah, I used up a lot of mine yesterday.
I'm no different. I sometimes get a little bankrupt too, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, James, listen to what you teach. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got to go back and reframe that. That's funny. Now, when it comes to this book as well, so everything, and every belief is a lie. You've done great work with that. How do you then take your work and translate it to the next level for you, the next evolution for you, Lisa?
Right. So that was the part of all right, I know everything I don't want to be. So a lot of the process is going through the healing process. But then when you start to get to the other side, is like, okay, who am I? Right. And I always say I learned the greatest gifts of who I am by figuring out who I wasn't. Right.
Smart.
When I lived in a town that I didn't share the same values were, I realized what my values were. But someone had given me this why test from the Why Institute. And I took this test and it was like my head exploded because I had waited my whole life for this information. And it seems really simple, but I will tell you the way it changed my life was because that little girl who thought she was stupid, who was going to school, I didn't fit in. I didn't learn that way. I found out that my why is challenge. I challenge conventional thinking and I think outside the box.
I like that.
When I discovered that about myself, I realized that I just didn't fit in the conventional schools where you had to memorize information and regurgitate it. I'm an experiential learner. I would have done better maybe in a Montessori school or some other different form of education. And so I realized that I actually have a very high level of EQ. I just don't put an IQ test in front of me.
Well, as we
And
know,
that's what's so
intelligence,
great.
as we know, intelligence is not necessarily education. Intelligence is just common sense. I mean, there's so many different aspects of that.
Right.
And as we know, unfortunately, for some standardized tests, they're geared towards certain individuals and not the holistic aspect.
Right.
But I believe there are 8 different levels of what intelligence is. So if you don't fall into the quote IQ part that the school says, the
Right.
scholastic stuff, there's so many other versions of intelligence. So just like you realize, wow, I am a brilliant person, and it just may not be in that realm. So for all of you who are also going through this as well, I encourage you to look up the different forms of intelligence, and you'll
Yeah,
see you have that. Mm-hmm.
Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Howard Gardner, who was a professor at Harvard, wrote a book, The 9 Different Types of
Yeah,
Intelligence.
perfect.
Yeah, you
Yes,
were right
it's
on.
amazing.
And
Yeah, and so
that was a great book for me. Yeah.
yes, and it's really empowering. What I really like about what you're saying as well is when you can put a name to something. Okay, this is a lie.
Yes.
This is a
Yeah.
belief. This is truth. Or this is, low self-esteem, whatever it is. When you can really identify what it is and put a name to it, then you know what you're dealing with. But when we have so much that's going on and we're just too overwhelmed, we don't know that there's nothing new under the sun. We've
Right.
experienced this. Someone else has experienced this. So there's information about it. Specifically now, there's so much we can find online. But when you put a name to it, it depowers or takes away that power of that label,
Exactly.
because it's just simply a label. Now you know what it is. Now you know how to conquer it.
Right. Because when you're different, you get bullied. So as a
Mm-hmm.
child, when you're different and you think differently and you are different, you're misunderstood. So
Mm-hmm.
I always thought of myself as kind of an outlier. And when I
Yeah.
realized that that was my gift. So
Mm-hmm.
becoming, learning that why about myself really empowered me. And then we have something called the why operating system. So there's a how and a what. So my why is the emotion behind
Mm.
everything. And if you
Interesting.
have a business, you want to use your why operating system in your branding, because
Oh,
that's where people purchase from. Is the limbic brain is part of your
okay.
why, where
Yeah.
the emotional
Interesting.
part of your decision making comes from.
Yes.
Now my how is better way, so I'm always looking for a better way and sharing it. My what is the ability to make sense out of complicated situations and
Mm.
problems. So I'm different, I'm better, and I'm a problem solver. So if you want something like that, that's what I offer. And those are the
It's
people who I
amazing.
speak to. And so it's very concise,
Yeah.
and there's 9 of them. And I had a client who had the why of simplify. And he had
Oh.
a lot of shame around it because he had this idea that he worked with all these engineers and he would get these 5-page, emails. He responded in 4 bullet points and he's like, "How do I charge for that?" I said, "You're
Oh,
not
gotcha.
charging hourly.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
charging for your wisdom and taking this into, the public
Mm-hmm.
domain where
Mm-hmm.
people need to learn to understand this in layman's terms."
Yeah. It's a beautiful
So
gift.
he owned that. So we have so many, and it's also how to communicate. So if I knew your why,
Mhm.
then I know the type of language to use with you. It's unbelievable for sales and teams, because then you
Wow.
want to make sure you have the right assortment of the type of people, and you promote people into the positions where they are very excited and to be there, instead of promoting someone into a position where they're miserable because
Yeah.
it's not the right why.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize there are that many whys, and I love how you broke that down. You simplified it for me as well. So I'm very,
Yeah.
very, very grateful for that. So I'm looking forward to really endorsing your book and having people be connected with you. Unfortunately, Lisa, our time is up. We literally flew by. We could talk about this all day. If my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you and to purchase your book, And Every Belief is a Lie, as well as work with you, Lisa Schmer. Let me say that again. You got so worked up. Lisa Schermerhorn. Let me say
You
that again.
said it the first 2 times
I
better than
know.
I did the first time. But believe me,
Yeah, so we're
I've heard a lot. So anyway, it's Center for Next Level Performance Coaching. It's
Mhm.
cnlpcoaching.com. And you can find my book on Amazon at And Every Belief is a Lie. And I offer free consultations. Please reach out. I'd love to talk to you. This is my passion, and
Yes.
I look forward to hearing from your viewers.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all your wisdom. We truly appreciate that. If your viewers and listeners also know if they can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I'll connect you with Lisa Schermerhorn. Got it right. And her book and all of her information. Like I said, I highly endorse her. Lisa, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on my show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.